want to try to impart some valuable nasiha to our young brothers and sisters on things that they can do to help protect their community and help force this country to live up to the better part of itself. It's going to be a very thought-provoking discussion this evening, inshallah. And it's going to veer into the area of politics as well. Something we cannot avoid, especially in times like this. But getting back to the subject at hand, brothers and sisters, there is so much that we as Muslims can learn from the African American struggle for human rights. One of the most important things that we can learn is the importance of faith in that struggle. Unfortunately, today, the vast majority of churches in the black community are far removed in terms of letter and spirit from the churches that were at the heart of the struggle for human rights for African American people yesterday. Unfortunately, many of our churches, following the lead of much larger and more well-established churches, have latched on to what is called the prosperity gospel. Seems like everything is about materialism, capitalism. It wasn't like that yesterday. Yesterday, religion and there was a spiritual force among African American people that helped them to navigate some of the most dark and difficult times of our journey to self-realization. Even as recent as the civil rights struggle, as it's euphemistically called, of the 50s and 60s into the 70s, one of the things that we find, especially in the South, was that many of the large demonstrations that took place, that we read about, that we see in these special documentaries on the African American struggle in this country, when we see Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., when we see Malcolm X, when we see Fannie Lou Hamer and so many other giants, Medgar Evers, most of those demonstrations that took place that resulted in wholesale violence by the establishment, by police forces, with dogs and guns, batons. Many of those demonstrations were organized from the churches. There was a spiritual force that propelled the struggle of the African American community for human rights. There was a spiritual force that helped to uphold the spirits, the individual and collective spirit of our people during the most difficult times, that kept us going. Another lesson that we can derive from the African American struggle for human rights is the understanding that struggle is necessary. That there can be no progress without sacrifice and struggle. There is no progress. On that note, I want to share a few quotes with you that I brought with me. Frederick Douglass, one of the leading figures of the African American freedom struggle in the mid-1800s, a former slave who escaped the plantation, who eventually became one of the leading figures in the anti-slavery abolitionist movement, became a counselor to Abraham Lincoln. He said, "Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the roar of its many waters. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." End quote. He also stated, "Where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, and where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade them, neither persons nor property will be safe." The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stated in a speech entitled "Strength to Love" in 1963, and he probably delivered this speech in a church. He said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." He also said, "We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." He also said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." These are some of the words of guidance that helped us navigate our way through the shoals of oppression in this country. And these are lessons that would serve our community, our spiritual community, well today to learn. I want to share something with you from one of the great ones. From one of the great ones from our spiritual community. We often read the sterling words, or we hear about the sterling legacy of someone by the name of Saalakhan al-Ayyubi. Even the non-Muslims, the historians, the sociologists of history, the political scientists, the men and women, the learned men and women of religion who understand the history of religious struggle in the world, they even hold this man up high. They refer to him as Saladin. At a time when the Crusaders were using Al-Aqsa as a stable for their horses, the Muslim community at the time was so degraded in Al-Quds, they were using Al-Aqsa as a stable for their horses. Saalakhan delivered a speech. I imagine that these words were delivered during one of the Friday khutbas He said, "We hope in Almighty Allah, to whom be praise, who leads the hearts of Muslims to calm what torments them. As long as the seas bring reinforcements to the enemy and the land does not drive them off, our country will continue to suffer at their hands, and our hearts will be tormented by the sickness caused by the harm they do to us. Where is the sense of honor of the Muslims, the pride of the believers, the zeal of the faithful? We shall never cease to be amazed at how the unbelievers have shown trust, while the Muslims have been lacking in zeal. The Muslims have become negligent and lazy, the victims of useless stupefaction. If, Allah forbid, Islam should draw rein, obscure her splendor, and blunt her sword, there would be no one, east or west, far or near, who would blaze with zeal for Allah's religion or choose to come to the aid of truth against error. This is the moment to summon from far and near all those who still have blood in their veins. But we are confident, thanks be to Allah, in the help that will come from Him, and entrust ourselves to Him in sincerity and intention and deepest devotion. Allah willing, the unbelievers will perish, and the faithful shall have a sure deliverance. Brothers and sisters, 5 years, the history books say 5 years after Salahuddin al-Ayyubi delivered those sterling words, Al-Aqsa was liberated. And not only was it a cause of celebration for the Muslims, it was a celebration for Christians and Jews who had also been suffering under the yoke of the Crusaders. They too were hungering for deliverance, and it came through the hands of a mujaddid by the name of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, who was inspired by his teacher. Oh, brothers and sisters, we are living in a time of challenge and a time of opportunity. Again, history is circle, it's cyclical. Names and faces change, but the pattern of human behavior remains the same. We today are being challenged. We today are being summoned. We today are being challenged to live, to step into the shoes of those great ones who preceded us, who understood that struggle was necessary in order to establish truth and justice. It cannot be any other way. We cannot pray this away, brothers and sisters. We cannot pray this away. We have got to work. We have got to show tawakkul, trust in Allah. We have to demonstrate the iman that is supposed to be in our hearts. And we have got to be willing to struggle and sacrifice. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on the issue of praying something away, he said, and this is a very profound and a very thought-provoking hadith. He said, by the one in whose hand rests my soul, you must surely enjoin the good and forbid the evil. Otherwise, it is expected that Allah will send against you a punishment, and you will supplicate Him, but your supplications will not be answered. Think about that. We have a responsibility to stand up. We have a responsibility in these challenging times to fight back. I'll never forget, in a speech that was delivered by the former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark, we brought him to Washington, D.C. back in the mid to late 90s. It's about the mid-90s. At the time, he was involved in the appeals process as an attorney for the blind Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman. May Allah be pleased with him. I'll never forget how he ended his speech to a room full of people. The room was full. I would say the room was about the size of this musalla here. And it was full. About 2/3 of those in the room were Muslims. It was held at an Islamic center in Washington, D.C. About 1/3 were non-Muslims, among them some very prominent people who came to hear what the former U.S. Attorney General had to say. Ramsey Clark is now in his 90s, and he's one of the most respected, still living former government officials in America. He said at the end of his speech, America needs Muslims to stand up for Islam. It is the one revolutionary force that truly cares about humanity. Think about that. Think about that. And think about where we are today. Vis-a-vis what Allah Ta'ala has given us in this one-of-a-kind, world-class deen called Islam. Brothers and sisters, these challenges will not go away. And us just labeling ourselves or just identifying ourselves as Muslim will not prevent us from feeling the weight of what others are feeling. In fact, we might even feel it even more because of what we've been given versus what we're not doing with it. Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he said civilization is based on justice, and the consequences of oppression are devastating. Therefore, it is said Allah aids the just state, even if it is non-Muslim, and withholds his help from the oppressive state, even if it is Muslim. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of this land, he said something that echoed what Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah had said many generations before him. And these words, if you ever visit Washington, D.C., you go up into the Jefferson Memorial, you can see these words inscribed in the wall of his memorial. He said, I tremble for my country when I reflect God is just. His justice cannot sleep forever. Think about that, my brothers and sisters. Think about that and think about where we are. This madness that we are having to deal with, it is not going to go away anytime soon. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My dear brothers and sisters, time is upon us. It really got away from me. MashaAllah ta'ala, I invite those of you who are present to join us this evening. Join us this evening, inshallah ta'ala, after Salatul Maghrib for a very, very thought-provoking discussion on the challenges we're faced with and how we can meet these challenges, inshallah ta'ala. And the last thing I'll say is, for those of you who are in a position to help us after you, and this is what will really give added weight to your zakat or sadaqah. This is what will give added weight to it. After You have donated what is expected of you in order to maintain this house of Allah. If you're in a position to do so, please visit our table and just put in the box whatever you can. We have magazines on the table. Those magazines are free. We have some other materials, some books on the table, small donation for those. But the most important thing is you are in a position to really be able to help the Afia Foundation, a Muslim-led human rights organization, with the very important work that it has. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight, inshallah ta'ala. I should note here, and this announcement was given to me just before I came up. There will be a youth lecture. Okay, that's me. The youth lecture tonight. Youth and social justice involvement here at ICD with Al-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan, your brother. It's going to be at 6:45, inshallah ta'ala. There will also be a suicide prevention training seminar this Sunday, March 8th, from 3 to 5 p.m. here at ICD. Please make sure to register before attending. And lastly, there's a mental calculation course every Tuesday for ages 5 through 14 from 5:30 to 7:30. With that, I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing me to be here with you today, and I look forward to the discussions that will ensue as the day goes on. Rabbina la tu'akhidna in nasina el aktanna. Rabbina wa la tahmil alayna isran kama hamaltuhu alla alladhina min qablina. Rabbina wa la tahammilna ma la taqata lana bih. Wa'fu anna waghfir lana warhamna anta maulana fansurna ala qawmil kafirin. Aqulu qawli hadha wa astaghfirullah wa lakum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول